Welcome back. We are back to the Academy of States 3.0, and I highly encourage you to go back and look at the tape that we've had on this and rewatch and learn and take the notes. And as we've talked about, there's more information. You can come back to pathtoreform.org with the materials and the resources that are there. We have a really special opportunity now that what we're talking about, what unites us absolutely is greater than what divides us. And the opportunity to come from a bipartisan perspective on things that we know as a nation. We have the opportunity to restore diversity in our states while still strengthening our union. It's my great honor to, as we come into the panel, overcoming convention apprehension. How do we come at this from a bipartisan perspective? What do we bring together that we can build upon from a bipartisan perspective? It's my great honor to introduce to you Representative Carmine Gentile from the state of Massachusetts. Representative Gentile earned his bachelor's degree from Tufts University and his Juris Doctorate law degree from Suffolk University. He was recognized by the Speaker of the House for his leadership on the issue of campaign finance reform and was appointed to a Massachusetts Citizens Commission to look at drafting potential amendments as an advocate to an amendment for the Constitution to reverse some of the campaign finance issues that have happened nationally. Representative Gentile serves on the House as the House Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Higher Education, State Administration, Regulatory Oversight, Elderly Affairs, Natural Resources, and Agriculture. We have a lot of things in common in that direction. We both served as Scoutmasters. We've both been presidents of Rotary Clubs, and it's my great honor to introduce to you Representative Carmine Gentile, and as we talk about how we approach Article 5 from a bipartisan perspective. Representative, as we've looked at this, I'd like to just ask you first, tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you come to this whole issue of Article 5 in Massachusetts?
Well, thank you very much, Representative Ivory. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to be with everyone. Yes, my name is Carmine Gentile. I'm a state representative in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Where both the House and Senate are engaged this evening in what is expected to be our last day of formal sessions for 2022. We're in recess now, subject to a call of the chair, but hopefully that won't interrupt me very much. I want to thank everyone who's there in person today and also the folks who are remote. Again, I apologize to you in advance if I have to absent myself very briefly to cast a vote this evening. I've represented the 13th District of Middlesex County for 8 years now, and as Representative Ivory pointed out, I'm the House Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Higher Education, and you've noted the other committees that I'm serving on. In the first bicameral legislature established in 1644. My hometown of Sudbury, I also serve as chair of the Sudbury Housing Trust, a member of the Council on Aging, and vice chair of the local Democratic Town Committee. Before entering the Massachusetts legislature, I did practice law full-time, representing businesses and individuals in both civil and some criminal matters. I first became interested in the subject of Article 5 conventions about 6 years ago when I filed the resolutions for a United States constitutional amendment and a limited amendment proposing convention in order, as was pointed out, to return the authority of Congress and our state legislatures to once again be able to regulate campaign finance and essentially negate the Supreme Court's decision in the Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission decision, which came along about 11 years ago now. And that really opened the floodgates of corporations, both foreign and domestic, unions and billionaires to spend unlimited funds on our elections, drowning out really we the people, our voices. So this session and last, we have a 2-year session. I filed these resolutions again with a Republican colleague and 50 co-sponsors. In Massachusetts in 2018, in the general election, we had a question, and more than 71% of voters voted in favor of the creation of a Citizens Commission to consider and recommend potential amendments to the U.S. Constitution to establish that corporations do not have the same constitutional rights as human beings, and that campaign contributions and expenditures may be regulated, as they were for a couple of hundred years before the Citizens United case. The commission was formed in 2019 with 15 members altogether, composed of 3 members, each appointed by the Senate President, the Speaker, the Attorney General, the Governor, and the Secretary of the Commonwealth. I was one of the 3 members appointed by the Speaker of the House. The commission held public hearings and workshops over 20 times throughout the state over 2 years, receiving testimony from many people, and we ultimately proposed 2 amendments for consideration after endorsing the resolutions which I filed seeking a limited Article 5 convention for the purpose of promulgating an amendment to allow regulation of campaign finances. Now, James Madison noted that Article 5, I'll quote him, equally enables the general, by general I believe he meant federal, the general and state governments to originate the amendment of errors, as they may be pointed out by the experience on one side or the other, end of quote. I feel that the effort involved in calling an Article 5 convention of the states has in the past, and it can again prod Congress to itself propose an amendment for 38 states to successfully ratify, or perhaps for the first time, actually, we would hold such a general or limited convention. I'm glad to be invited to be with you today, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. I can't tell you how impressed I am that you would take a few minutes in the midst of what you're dealing with. I hope our audience members understand, I'm sure many of them do, how stressful and tense these last few days and minutes and the things that are flying. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Similar to you, I came at this right out of college. My first job out of college was working for the mayor of the city of Osaka in Japan. And as I arrived in Japan, they said, welcome aboard. We're so glad to have you. This is in 1989, but they said, you're deficit spending. And history tells us you're done. You're done as a superpower. That typically you're going to spiral out of control, and you're done. So we're looking to China. And it just blew me away. I mean, no, we're the United States of America, and we're leading in liberty in that light. And you're saying that we're done because we're deficit spending. And of course, the history at that time, we were maybe $1 trillion in our national debt, and they spelled out, no, by about 2010, you'll probably be about 13 trillion in debt, and it'll continue to spiral from there. And we see where we are. And like you, that drowning out people's voices, we now find ourselves at almost 31 trillion in debt. And the estimates are that within 5 to 6 years, short number of years, certainly less than a decade, we'll be paying $1 trillion a year just in interest. And that crowds out all of the sick people and the poor people and the elderly people and national defense and everything else. And I found myself deeply concerned about my children then, and now it's my grandchildren, having served for about 10 years in the House. And what can we do? And we keep looking at Washington, and I think we all think, we're going to get them in November. And come November, our team's going to get in, and their team's going to get in, and we're going to have this turnover, and the debt gets bigger, and the regulations get bigger. And as you mentioned, this drowning out of the people's voices continues to accelerate more and more. And I think that's what really brought me to Article 5 when we came into that and thought, here's a power, this is a tool that the founders and the framers reserved specifically in the event that Washington simply cannot regulate it itself. There's a safety valve. And I don't know that they meant it really as an emergency break glass safety valve. That I think they probably intended for us to use this more often, and even to have that as the deterrent effect. That if we're there using this and the ability to deter on that, and that's what really brought me into Article 5. I've been working on a number of the issues. We had a Mount Vernon conference a number of years ago that turned into the Assembly of State Legislators and Legislatures, and Republicans and Democrats, and worked on what rules to a convention might look like. And then there was a simulated convention of states held in 2016 in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I was privileged. I think it was one of the greatest honors of my legislative career to be elected to preside over that simulated convention of states. And Republicans and Democrats, in that sense that we really can do this. We know how to do this. We meet in committees all the time, and we know how to take debate and evidence. And the fact that we're meeting in committee doesn't run the state away. You know, sometimes we may do things that aren't wise in some of the eyes of the people, but then we can always go back and take another look at it. And it was that process that we know and we do all of the time. And then in 2017, there was a Phoenix convention to propose rules, and I had the privilege of serving as the vice chairman of that convention. And I think, like you, what if we don't? We're at a point in our nation that if we keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, and let's wait for November, and by golly, the tides are going to turn in November, and we just continue to see greater centralization, as you mentioned, more money going to Washington, less power to the people, and a smaller voice to the people. That, you know, I'm concerned that if we don't really use these constitutional tools and these rights, we may lose them. So I appreciate your perspective on that a great deal. I think we come a lot with a lot of the same approach and interest in that. Let's to the next question, and we talked about this a little bit before. You know, given the nature of the times, this idea of we really have to transcend this partisanship and partisan politics, particularly as we see coming out of Washington. Could you speak to, and you mentioned this earlier about drowning out the people's voice and the workshops that you held. How do you see Article 5 as potentially being a way to preserve that diversity in the states? Massachusetts is certainly different from Utah and different from Texas and California. How do you see Article 5 as an ability to potentially preserve that diversity and amplify, magnify the voice of the people?
Yes, thank you, Ken. You know, we had a congressman in Massachusetts many years ago who said that all politics are local, and I believe that's the case. You know, I work at the local level, I work at the state level, and I'm fortunate to enjoy very good communication and good working relationship with my two of our congresswomen and both of our U.S. senators, so that, you know, someone can have a conversation with me in one of the communities, one of the 4 communities I represent, and if I feel work is worthwhile and worth speaking up about, I can talk with my congressman or senator and propel them. But you know, really, what we learn at the local level informs what we need to do at the state level, and that informs what we need to do at the federal level. And I think you're correct, absolutely correct, in that when we feel that, when the people feel that, you know, something's not right, it needs to change, and it's not changing, you know, the change agents aren't being effective. Article 5 provides a vehicle for the states to come together, come together, and make a change. You know, you've come to this on looking at fiscal matters and feeling that, well, we really need to do something about deficit spending, and a lot of, you know, there are a number of folks in other states that have the same feeling, and maybe, you know, perhaps there's something there. Perhaps that's something that someday a number of states would want to put together an amendment in convention. I don't know. But the saving grace of all of this, there's 2 saving graces. One is that it requires 34 states to say, yes, okay, we will put this out there for states to ratify. 34, that's not a small number. And then it requires 38 of our states to actually ratify it. So and along the way, if any states that have ratified it have a change of heart, they can, and in the past they have, withdraw their ratification. So it's a really due diligent process, which we've actually only had to undo once. Once when we had prohibition and it didn't work. So after 10 years, we got otherwise. But that's the only example. And so this is a vehicle. There's different ways of getting to goals, and this is something that the founders put together. They gave us this Article 5 for a very good purpose, and using it, or the threat of using it, or planning to use it, has been effective in the past. I think it will continue to be effective, and I think we need to use it.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. The states several times had started moving toward Article 5 conventions and applications, and started to work toward a convention of states to use the second aspect of Article 5, where the states meet in convention. And as they got, as they got closer and closer, then Congress not wanting to take their hands off the wheel, they would then act and start to take action to do the very thing that the states were moving on. I think to your point, I don't know that I really see the issues that we're looking at as that different, that there's not that much daylight in the deficit spending and the campaign finance. I think it was Sam Feldman who spoke earlier that introduced me to the return on investment for lobbying Congress on major legislation. I was under the misapprehension that it was a mere 22,000% return on investment, and Sam corrected me and showed me evidence that it's actually 76,000% return on investment. And so when you look at the campaign finance and then that connected to the deficit spending, if the return on investment is 22,000 or 76,000, to take from the public fisc, to take either the actual money into benefits for studying the effects of excess alcohol on prostitutes in China, or toads in Panama, or Sesame Street programs in Afghanistan, that return on investment that comes through the campaign finance, I think those issues are greatly connected. And the ability to deliberate and as you said, to help the people's voice be more amplified, I think
I couldn't agree more, Ken. And it was only a few months ago they had an election, and they had a ballot question in California, and a company that's half owned by a Japanese conglomerate and the Saudi family. Together, those two entities possess about half of the stock in Uber. They spent $200 million to get the vote to go their way. It was a good investment for them because immediately after the vote, the value of the stock went up by $10 billion.
Right.
Spend $200 million, get a $10 billion return. Good investment, good business. Bad for the American people, good. I mean, I'm not saying whether it was independent of whether it was a good vote or a bad vote. The people's voices, the people that live in the state of California, their voices had to be drowned out by all that money.
Yeah, and your folks in Suffolk, I'm guessing they don't have a $200 million PAC to go in and lobby for their own personal liberty and their own personal voice, right?
There was an election in the state of New Hampshire for the U.S. Senate. There was $100 million spent in that election. Only $500,000 of it was from people in New Hampshire.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you. So this idea that the whole point of our constitutional system is that government of the people, by the people, for the people, and their voice matters when they can come to you, and when matters are governed closest to them, they can come to you and sit down in your office. And I'm sure you've had the experience, as have I, that someone comes and there's a problem, there ought to be a law, and you can help them walk through the process and actually change policy for them in their neighborhood. But for a citizen in Suffolk County that can't write a $200 million check to go to Washington to do that, forget about it, right? I mean, it's just...
So your congressman and my congresswoman and everyone's congressman or woman, they're getting there are millions of dollars, being spent to lobby them every,
Yeah.
I mean, one industry spends, Big Pharma spends $500,000 a year lobbying each of our people, each of our representatives in Congress.
Right.
And so do they listen? They'll listen to you. They'll listen to me, and our constituents write to them, and their staffs are reaching out. But the time, think about the time they spend. It's really sad. Today, congressmen and women spend 4 hours a day,
Right.
Monday through Friday, on the phone in cubicles, calling up, asking people for money, because that's the best way to raise money, is call someone up on the phone. 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Can you imagine?
Right.
Can you imagine? I can't. I mean, that'd be a good reason not to be a member of Congress. To have to spend 20 hours a week calling people for money, week in and week out. It's out of control. I'd like our congressmen and women to be able to focus on listening to what people are saying and what people need, and responding.
Yeah, and
They do, but they're losing a lot of time with this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And then, as Barack Obama said, they take out a loan in the name of our children, drawn on the Bank of China, to deliver on those promises. Let's shift gear just a little bit. So then,
Sure.
this idea of Article 5 is just merely a committee of states. I mean, under Article 5, states get together, they meet as a committee of states, and discuss whether or not to make proposals. If you could just, from your perspective, in Article 5, how do you see that operating, and do you have apprehension about the states meeting as a committee of states to discuss proposals and work through?
I do not. I frankly do not. Again, it's an opportunity to listen to one another. And again, if there are 34 states that decide they want to try something, well, fine. It has to be adopted by 38. And one would think that the representatives in that convention of a given state would be representing a majority of the folks who live in their state. So that if that's the case, if they're truly representing them, then a proposed amendment that comes out of such a convention would need an additional four states to ratify it over and above the 34 that are perhaps a good bet to ratify it.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. So to the extent that we get 34 states, 2/3, that make application, so now we trigger the convention. We're meeting in convention. We propose a set of rules that we're going to operate by that are similar to our rules of parliamentary procedure, and we start to move forward. I've had some people say that they're concerned that the very fact that I would meet with you to discuss that, my counterpart in Massachusetts, that I would meet with you, we should be afraid of even that very act of meeting in committee. Representative, why should my constituents not be afraid of me meeting with you, and why should your constituents not be afraid of you meeting with me in a committee of states to discuss the mutual problems we face in that structure in our nation?
No, really no need for fear whatsoever. I mean, in the House, the Massachusetts House, I'm one of the people with many people would categorize me as a progressive, and I have a friend. I have many friends, but one of my friends in the House, in the majority party in your state, minority in my state, he may be the most conservative. If he's not the most conservative, he's one of the 1 or 2 most conservative members in the House. We're good friends. We work together on some issues. We have very different opinions on others, but we're in agreement on, for example, helping seniors with tax breaks on their real estate, and we have no trouble whatsoever, getting together and having good discussions, and it's a good thing. When people talk with one another, when people listen to one another, people coming from different backgrounds, they maybe different grew up in different subcultures, what have you, but to the degree that we can listen to one another and things work out for the best.
Okay,
Always.
okay. So I'm gonna give you a hypothetical then. Let's suppose we have 34 states to meet on a fiscal responsibility amendment.
Mhm.
And so we convene, we're meeting, we approve the rules, and you would never do this, but let's just say you make a
Never say never.
let's just say you propose in a convention with the scope of fiscal responsibility amendment, you propose to eliminate the Second Amendment. What would you expect me to do?
I'd expect you to tell me that I'm out of order. It would be like trying to put absolutely out of order. It would be trying to, let's say, putting something into a bill that's not really in the four corners of what the bill's all about. You know, I mean, if there was a limited convention for the purpose of a fiscal amendment, and someone wanted to bring up the Second Amendment, well, they'd be out of order. If they want to bring up campaign finance, they'd be out of order.
Right.
And again, it goes to the enabling the enabling documentation for that convention. If the enabling documentation is that Utah has sent a representative there exclusively for this issue and not to opine or vote on anything else, it's to be a limited convention for this subject matter and nothing else, then I think, hard-pressed, I think would be hard-pressed to be going awry and trying to, I think if we did, I think if a limited convention did go off the rails and try to promulgate something having nothing to do with the enabling documentation, I think the response would be that, it's not valid. Not valid. I mean, I suppose at that point, I guess I would guess, it's interesting because, someone might go to the Supreme Court and say, well, what about this? What do you have to,
Right. Yeah.
And then, of course, if the Supreme Court issued a decision that people didn't like, well, maybe the Supreme Court would say, well, gee, we really don't have jurisdiction here. It's really,
I gotta say, we didn't prearrange that question at all in any way, and
No, we didn't.
I
We
loved
did
I
not.
loved your reaction. It was priceless to me. But I would do the same, and I would feel the same way, and I think you would agree with me that everyone in that convention, were something to be outside the four corners, not be germane, the entire convention would close that down as not being germane and out of order. And if the chair were to have ruled that in order, the entire convention would appeal that ruling and overrule the chair.
So right now, as we're here this afternoon, there are more than 34 states that have called for a convention for this purpose, or a convention for that purpose, a limited convention for this purpose, or a limited convention for that purpose. There are well more than 34. However, they're for different purposes. So no one's standing up and saying, oh, yes, well, now we'll call the convention because we have, no, because we understand that if someone's calling a limited convention for just this purpose only, then the fact that other people are trying to enable a convention for a different purpose, there's not a mesh. There's not a synthesis.
Okay, I want to just put an exclamation point on what you just said.
Yeah.
So the very fact that we've got applications on any number of subjects out already, and no one is clamoring to say, let's meet on this subject or that or the other, it answers the question in itself. That they don't mesh, they don't meet, they don't rise to the level of coming together by their very nature. I love that point. I'm going to write that down and give you a royalty on that one. No, it's a great argument. It really is. I mean, that in itself speaks to what comes together within a scope. All right, I want to come to the next one, that you and I both experienced this same argument from completely different perspectives. I'm probably considered one of the more conservative members of my body and working through this, but we both hear this fear of a runaway convention. Again, if I were to sit down with you and we were to come together on a subject that did rise to the level that met 34 within the four corners, and we come together, there's fears that somehow that convention in and of itself would run away. So from your perspective on the left, why would you say that that's not valid?
So you and I are both lawyers, and we've practiced for many years. And, you know, I look at this and I say, well, you know, there's risk in any human endeavor, but to call a convention for a limited purpose, for a limited focus, and not and specifically explicitly excluding the delegates to be deliberating on other areas outside that focus, you know, it really does seem a reasonably safe manner to proceed to me. And regrettably, you know, other people, you know, there are many people that feel otherwise, and people have a fear of the unknown. As a trial lawyer, I can remember a number of times when someone said to me, when I was endeavoring to do something, get a particular goal, they'd say, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh, no one's ever done that before. Oh no, the judge they won't allow that." And you know, really, in virtually each instance, I was successful. So, I mean, you know, it's something that we need to press on with.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned, and it kind of dropped my jaw just a little bit. You said the first bicameral legislature from 1644.
Right.
It's
That's
hard
right.
to even fathom that kind of history from my state. We became a state in 1896. There are also homes and a whole variety of things that are so much older than our state in your neighborhood. But looking at that from 1644 in America, in the context of self-governance, we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conventions that operate through a set of procedures and working through, and that same way that we work in a committee of states or colonies. Or I'm always fascinated with the committees of correspondence and Samuel Adams and James Otis and John Hancock, and you know, they came together, and within a short period of time they had all of the towns in Massachusetts connected together, and then within a year, with no Facebook and cell phone and texting, they had all of the colonies connected together in this committees of correspondence working together. And I really think, Representative, that that's the model, that was the prototype for this idea of states working together as a collective check against the national government. But I also like what you pointed out, and I want you to elaborate on this a little bit more. You mentioned the 18th and the 21st Amendment. Why is that significant to our discussion?
So, you know, as legislators, we understand that when we're looking at passing legislation, we want to always look to make sure that there's not an unintended consequence that's going to pop up. We're always looking for unintended consequences. And you know, we try to prevent that. And when we fail and something goes awry, well, okay, we step in and we rewrite the law, we fix it, or we just pull it back entirely. And in the instance you mentioned, you know, prohibition, you know, 3/4 of the states decided, okay, this is a good thing, we're doing it. Okay, we've got prohibition now. You can't be, you know, selling liquor in the liquor store. You can't be going to a bar, what have you. It didn't work out very well. It caused, you know, an organized crime to develop and be created in this country, and it just was a very bad time. And it only took, well, 10 years. You know, in the scope of human experience, 10 years is not a long time, but with legislation, I don't know how things are in Utah. In Massachusetts, sometimes it very often might take us 6 years or 8 years or 10 years or 12 years to get something through. So that was a bad experiment. And after 10 years, we realized it. And you know, 3/4 of the states met together and We have a restaurant across and bar across the street from the Massachusetts State House called the 21st Amendment.
We don't have one of those in Utah.
That undid the wrong of the 18th. Yes.
Yeah, Carmen, we don't have one of those in Utah.
No.
But Utah ratified the 21st Amendment. And I love that experience. So when you think about the discussion that we've had so far, we haven't had conventions combining together applications that don't meet the four corners. So we've certainly not run away and gone off the rails there. If we were to meet, we were going to have a set of rules that we all kind of know what the rules look like, but that's the first order of business. We're going to agree to the rules. And if I were to propose, or Representative Gentile were to propose something even a little bit outside the scope, you mentioned fiscal responsibility to campaign finance, and there's an arguable nexus there that we've already talked about. But even that, you would agree, no, that doesn't fit the four corners of that call. So we would have to get someone within the delegation of a state to convince the other members of his state, with their state legislature watching over their shoulder, to then come in and advocate to go outside that scope. And then they're going to have to convince a majority of other delegations from the other states to go outside their scope, convince all of the members to vote as a state for them to go outside the scope, and then propose it on the floor, and the president on the floor to accept that even as a motion without ruling them out of order, and the entire floor to not overrule the judgment of the presiding officer, even assuming they would rule, which you and I would both say is completely ridiculous. And then they would have to send it out to the states without someone going to the Supreme Court and saying, hey, wait a minute, we're going to enjoin this because you're so far out of your scope. And then that would have to go out to the states and somehow be ratified by 38 states. I
think we're safe.
I think we're about as safe as we can be. There's no sure bet in life, but I think we're pretty close. Final question, and I'm so grateful for your time in this incredibly busy time, and just grateful that you would take the time to do this. Representative, what if we don't exercise this authority? As states, what if we don't use that tool that the framers that you mentioned gave to us?
I feel that our democracy, it's not a spectator activity. We have to get engaged. If we're going to have our democracy thrive, if we're going to succeed as a nation, then we need to be engaged. And one way that we can be engaged is if enough people in enough states feel that something is wrong and needs to be righted, and discern a way to right that wrong, the Article 5 presents a path. And it's interesting. We had the Articles of Confederation before the Constitution, and the Articles of Confederation, they had nothing in them. They didn't have an Article 5 in them. Yeah. They had no way to really change, to wake up and say, oh, wait a second. And so they were just thrown out. They were just thrown away in toto because it just couldn't work with them. I think that this is a vehicle which has been threatened to be used in the past with the success of Congress acting and promulgating amendments. And I think we need to continue along that path. And if we end up actually having a limited convention on one subject or another, that's great. That's terrific. Some would argue, I don't know if I haven't gotten there myself, but some could argue that, oh well, let's just call for a general convention. I feel that, well, you might feel, well, no, that's just too much to prepare for. If we have a matter that we're focusing on one matter or another matter, we're not looking at a shotgun approach to legislation or to lawmaking. So I'm comfortable calling a limited convention. I'm not there today for general, just a general no holds barred convention.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm nearly there on a general convention, but I agree with you. I think the proper way to go, And the reason was I taught an American federalism class at Utah Valley University, and we were talking about Congress, and we looked up the definition of Congress, and it was a delegation, a group of delegates meeting together to decide an issue. That's the definition of a Congress. And clearly, if Congress is what it is, its approval rating is in single digits, and they're going where they're going, and we have runaway every single day, a group of states getting together could hardly do worse when we're looking to restore that voice and balance. But I really agree with you that the right way to go is we look at a single issue or very, very limited issues. We have that scope. We get together and we meet and we look at the issue to be addressed. And I love what you brought up with the 17th Amendment. Even by having those discussions, seriously having those discussions, Congress now knows that the states are starting to look at that power that they have. Otherwise, we're a toothless tiger. They know there's no check, and government without check grows limitlessly. That's what the framers told us. Government grows to the limit that it's checked, and without any check, it grows limitlessly, and that's clearly what we're seeing. And if we're expecting Congress to change by doing the same thing we've been doing, and they're going at an accelerating rate, we have to accelerate these discussions. I think we have to move toward these meetings. I agree with you. We need to move toward some single subject, limited subject conventions, show that that is working. We do sit down and meet and we work together. We understand the rules of the road and move forward and move on that issue. And I'm really afraid, Representative, that if we don't, the rate of acceleration that we're on right now with the taking on of power that other, but for what Congress has taken, our people could come to you and I, and we could help them solve and change and modify the policy in our state. When Congress takes over sidewalks and street lights and any host of other issues in our community, they have no voice. They have no voice at all to go forward. And to then be able to restore that great diversity. I love that Massachusetts is different from Utah because I love to visit there. I love to go and walk around and see how you do what you do, and it's that diversity, but we still come together to unify and strengthen our nation for the big things, right? The international things, the interstate things, but Massachusetts to be Massachusetts and Utah to be Utah, that's how we blow off that steam and that tension. And sadly, every 4 years, we want everyone to be made in one president's image. In the next 4 years, we want everybody in the United States to be made in that president's image. And that tension, I fear, is growing to such a point where we're really fracturing the social cohesion. But I agree with you. If we keep going down that road lies danger and treacherous things. But if we simply get together and use the tools we've been given, we give the people their voice back with a risk that I agree with you is so minimal that how could we not? I'm so grateful. As we go to questions, I want to take a few. Do you have just a couple minutes for questions before we break?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to a few questions. We'll take those, and then we've got one more segment and we'll wrap. David.
I know the Convention of States project has been active in Massachusetts, as you are supporting their resolution, and of course you're supporting the campaign finance reform resolution. And I see where both of you got good committee reports, but neither of you made it to the floor for a vote that I could see. So my question is this: I've traveled to some 26 states. I've tried to get these groups to work together, etc. But if you could do what we did in Oklahoma, which is we took two groups with two different resolutions, put them into one resolution, and we said, okay, all you guys that support this one, if you'll vote for the other one, then all the guys understand. And so what I'm suggesting to you in the context of working together, bipartisanship, if you put your legislature, your resolution, which is, I think, viewed by many on the right as being more left-leaning, and then the opposite with the Convention of States. If y'all went together in Massachusetts and worked together and supported each other, do you think you'd have any more success in getting it passed?
Frankly, no. personalities, and I'm thinking of the politics of it. I think it's an idea worth thinking about and looking at, but I don't see those two groups coming together. It's something. It's pretty. It is something to explore. It is something to explore. I just. It's almost like oil and water. We have in Massachusetts now. We have the most popular governor in the United States. I mean, all governors have a approval rating, and our governor's approval rating. He's a Republican governor in a Democratic state, and he's the most popular governor. People in Massachusetts really give him a high rating. However, his party now in Massachusetts is diametrically opposed. I mean, they're like oil and water. So it's a strange, the politics, we always have to get into the weeds and just see who the personalities are and what's what. It's all very detail and fact oriented. So I don't see that happening in Massachusetts in the very near future.
We would love for Massachusetts to be an example of how, if we both hold our nose a little bit and support each other, we can get this passed, because the goal is to get the 34 states to have a convention. I think if we ever have a convention, we'll show that it won't run away, and then it'll open it up for all of the groups. It'll be like the crack in the dam breaking. So that's why I encourage you guys there. I'll be happy to come personally broker it if you like.
If I may, let me add on to that, Representative. I really like what you talked about with, you had 20 meetings, you went out to the public, you had groups in. I wonder if a group like you and I and maybe some others, and we get to an NCSL and a CSG and an ALEC, and we kind of have community meetings like that among legislators.
Yes, no, I think that's in fact, tonight I have a bill which I'm hoping is acted on. I think it may be acted on because it was actually put together by House leadership. I think the Speaker's office put it in. And it's basically the Citizens Committee that I served on for a couple of years. When it was formed by the ballot box, it didn't provide for commissioners who were appointed to be for vacancies. There was nothing in there said about filling vacancies if someone resigned. So I put something in to the budget, an outside section to the budget to be able to do this. The governor took it out. The Speaker put together a bill to undo that, and I'm hoping that it's taken up tonight. And if it is, the commission that's already put together a proposed amendment, the purpose of us continuing for the next few years is just that, to work with groups in other states, that are looking at Article 5 conventions. Oh, we just come to order, but okay.
We have a Federalism Commission that we'd be happy to have you come on and entertain. But I think we're going to be meeting with some of the leadership at NCSL and here over the next couple of days, and I'll mention our conversation. But I think there's some merit to taking that show on the road among our community of legislators to see what we can bring together. Do you have time for one more question? You got to run.
One more question.
What do you think your colleagues need to see and hear from the other side of the aisle to help bring the parties together around an Article 5 convention?
Well, we actually have the left and the right together on some issues for Article 5. We do. I mean, on the Citizens United, on the campaign finance article, we have Republicans and we have Democrats throughout the United States on that. There is bipartisan support for a number of matters. Yeah.
Representative, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you've taken time out of this amazingly busy day. Any final comments?
Well, I am really so grateful that I was invited to participate this afternoon, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
I do as well. We share a goal that I think for our children, grandchildren, our community members, to re-engage, stay in the game with each other, and make sure that we restore that balance that amplifies their voice. And I'm committed with you completely on that. And let's just figure out the right tools that we get something across the line, that we can work within those rules of order that we know, and show that this process works. Thank you so very much. So grateful you've taken time, and you have fun. Hopefully you don't go till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Thank you. As well. That was delightful. Oh my goodness, I enjoyed that so much. I enjoyed the discussions that we've had, and the possibilities that we may have to continue that discussion and keep moving forward. We have an opportunity now to one last segment. We are going to hear from Bruce Lee, who is the director of the Phoenix Correspondence Commission that we've heard about earlier, and then I'll make some final comments and we'll wrap. Bruce is a business management professional, educator, in experience all over the globe in management operations, instructor of constitutional law, public policy, finance, global business. Significantly, he's got the most dynamite smile and sparkle in his eye of anybody you've ever seen. And Bruce single-handedly has taken on the executive director role of this Phoenix Correspondence Commission, of bringing a group of legislators together to continue the work on the Phoenix convention that we had to move forward this effort in an Article 5 convention. I'm honored to know him, and Bruce will give you some time to talk about this, and then we will wrap.
Ken is being more than gracious, and I want to thank you for the privilege of actually being associated with a group of such knowledgeable speakers, and obviously patriots and citizens who love our country and are concerned about our future. And for that, I'm indebted. As Ken introduced me, I am Bruce Lee. No jokes about my Asian cousin. But I am the executive officer of the Phoenix Correspondence Commission, a committee of correspondence for all the states collaborating together on these important issues of fiscal integrity. Now, back, as already been mentioned, and Dave Goldenshoe kindly gave me a little bit of a preview for you, so I won't go into all the nuts and the bolts, but back in September 2017, 19 states came together. That was the first time since 1861 that all 50 states for a national convention had been invited. And kudos and credit to the Arizona legislature for taking leadership in that regard. And along with those 19 states were several other states that were observing the process. And they came together to adopt a set of rules to guide an Article 5 convention. And one of its final things it did was establishing the Phoenix Correspondence Commission. And using that title, Correspondence Commission, as a nod back to our history of how those had been used decades prior. Now, in this purpose, the PCC, of the Phoenix Correspondence Commission, was created to provide a mechanism for recommending to Congress a time and a place for a future calling of an Article 5 Convention of the States. And to achieve that task, we had several recommended functions. One, to monitor the passage of resolutions by all the states. To serve, and I think this is a very critical component in the PCC, as a committee of correspondence between the states, Congress, and the people, to allow a forum for discussion and review and coming together. It is establishing a mechanism for making a recommendation to Congress, and then to performing any of the ancillary responsibilities that may be necessary in calling of a convention. So in this limited capacity, it's a representative body that's designed to further the role of federalism here in our great country. And interesting enough, as the Phoenix Commission, pardon me, the Phoenix Convention itself was a duly called convention, it was a government body when it was gavelled in. And therefore, when they created the Correspondence Commission to follow up on the work of that convention. The PCC is actually a government body. We're not a 501c3, we're not a limited liability corporation. It's a very unique type of organization that has been created. The states need to be in discussion and conversation with each other, and we as the commission are looking for 2 delegates from every state, one from the upper house and one from the lower house, ideally. And in that regard, we started off with initial 19 states. There was a pause due to COVID, which sort of entirely absorbed the air in the room for most state legislators. And that was a significant pause. But about a year ago, we began the re-engagement process. Actually, Now, in that time, we've had 4 additional states added to the 19. And we have 4 others pending that I've met with, and I'm very encouraged by that. And even today, we added a state to the commission. So we're well on our way to have a majority of states and to continue to perform this function. So some of the states that we are looking for, and again, there's several states out there, but we do have our targeted states, including Florida, Illinois, New Mexico, Ohio, Wisconsin. And if you are involved in a state that's, gee, I'm not sure whether I'm part of the Phoenix Correspondence Commission or not, let me know. I'll be glad to clue you in that if there's been a delegate appointed. The process of becoming an appointed delegate is very simple. It's a 1-page form, not too complicated, authorized by leadership in the whichever appropriate chamber. And it's not a tremendous great deal of labor involved to be a delegate. So don't be fearful of that. And in this regard, we are meeting regularly, approximately every 3 months. We're having a general delegate session. And we have our committee structure and various things of this nature moving ahead at the same time. And with that, let me just simply say, I would love to discuss with you if you think your state needs to be involved. I think every state, all 50 states need to be involved in this process. And by being part of the process, we're part of the upcoming constitutional process. We're at the table, we're part of the discussion, and we're stronger together. So not to wane on, I think I can stop there. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer anything. Yes, sir.
Do you have to be a legislator to be the commissioner that's appointed by one of the chambers in your state?
That's a good question. Do you have to be a legislator to be appointed as a delegate to the Phoenix Correspondence Commission? And the answer is no. Most are, but it is not a requirement. Just like if you're a delegate to an Article 5 convention, probably most will be elected representatives, but you're free to choose. Each chamber is free to choose whoever they think might be the appropriate delegate and a representative of their chamber. Great question. All right, Ken, I'll turn it back to you then, I guess. God bless you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
We have to recognize, we would be extremely remiss if we did not recognize a number of people that have been so incredibly involved in this. The man behind the camera who has said nothing, former Senator Kevin Lundberg, who has been involved and helped to start the state legislators Article 5 caucus. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have
plenty to say. I'll wait for the editing of the video.
Wendy Reeves, Marcus Constantino with Path to Reform. You can't even imagine the hours that have gone in there. Thank you very much. Peggy, please don't. Peggy Probst. Peggy Probst, also involved with Path to Reform. Thank you so very much. And Neil Schurer, Neil has been so all over the nation, meeting with anyone who will, and keeping the energy going on this and driving this force forward so incredibly. Neil, former senator from Iowa, who's been engaged in this, and I'm not done with the thank yous yet. So
No, that's fine.
I got to make a special thank you, but thank you very much, Neil, on that. And I'm going to let you close, but Vicki is not just a speaker and a pretty face in all of this. Vicki has been so involved in putting this whole organization. Of course, we want to thank all of our speakers who have done an incredible job. They've done an amazing job in pulling this together. And I first thank the speakers. Thank you very much again for what you've done and the information you've brought together. Thank you to the speakers. And Vicki, in addition to providing incredible information, has helped to organize all of this and pull this all together. So thank you very, very much. I want to just provide a couple of closing comments in what we've seen. In 1787, they got together to form a more perfect union. The union they had was not working. It was a union. They started out, it was not going to last much longer. And what we've seen and what we're seeing with where we are now, we've got a union that is in trouble. And we have an opportunity to create an even more perfect union, hopefully that lasts another 250 years. We've made it 250 years on this tank of constitutional gas. It is time to refill the tank and retread the tires and change the oil and look at the structure of this system so that we fine-tune that our posterity can make another 250 years. And as we heard from Representative Gentile, this is not left-right. This is not Republican-Democrat. This is not progressive and conservative. This is about the balance in this constitutional structure that amplifies the voice of our people. Without that balance, they have no voice. And that's absolutely critical. Just a couple closing thoughts. James Madison, when he introduced the Bill of Rights that Representative Gentile was talking about, he said it would be the state legislatures that'll jealously and closely watch the operations of the national government. They can resist with more effect every assumption of power better than any power on earth can do, because they're the sure guardians of the people's liberty. And then John Dickinson said the states, the governments, they're sovereign and supreme in all things that relate to each state. They're subordinate barely in the things that relate to the whole, and it'll be their own faults if they allow the federal government to interfere in the things of their sovereignty. Clearly what we've seen, the states are the solution. Article 5 is the tool that we have to completely transform this. There is a quote, and I will end on this, that Tench Cox was a member of the New York Ratifying Convention. And he made a statement that he said, the sovereign power of altering and amending the Constitution is the real point of sovereignty. That doesn't rest with the federal government. Altering and amending the Constitution rests with the states. And not just the states, the state legislatures. The state legislatures, if 2/3 of them propose an amendment and 3/4 of them ratify, becomes part of the Constitution without any interference of Congress. The ultimate point of sovereignty rests with the states and with the state legislatures. That's a responsibility, it's an opportunity, it's a duty. And as we talked about, may you live in interesting times. We clearly live in interesting times, and rather than asking what Washington can do for us, we've kind of seen what that would be. It's what we can do for Washington, and I love what Ronald Reagan said, this is a wonderful time to be alive. We're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. We've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something, for liberty and freedom and fairness, and these are things worth fighting for. We don't have to fight with muskets. We don't have to get out on the line. Because of what they gave us in the Constitution, we have Article 5, we can fight with that to restore that governing voice, restore that balance that amplifies our people to govern of, by, and for the people. I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the information we had, and let's go use Article 5 as our tool to create an even more perfect union for that next 250 years. So thank you very much. Neil, thank you for putting this together.
Well, and Ken, I wanted to come up here and just thank you. Your leadership in this and able to guide us through this. We had wonderful presenters and legislators that are here and things, but You are really a guide in this effort, and I want to thank you for being part of it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure to work with you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a wrap for Academy 3.0. Thanks for attending.